All right, thank you all for joining us today. The time is 9:02 a.m. and the meeting of the A through F Appeals Committee is called to order. We will now call the roll of the committee members. Member Meyerson,
Here.
Dr. Hagerman,
Present.
Dr. Clay.
Here.
This committee has a quorum. These board members represent all members of the committee as appointed by the board. Could everyone else, staff, please identify themselves, starting with the board staff and then the department? My name is Jessica Mueller, the Policy and Research Administrator for the State Board of Education.
My name is Shannon Etzen, Project Director of Constituent Services for the State Board of Education.
Sean Ross, Executive Director, State Board of Ed.
Bruce Duplanty, Deputy Director, State Board of Ed.
Sean Smith, Arizona Department of Education.
Bethany Spangenberg, Deputy Associate Superintendent of Assessment at the department.
Thank you so much. It is noted that this meeting is hybrid access, both in person in Phoenix and then over Zoom, as well as live streamed over YouTube. The meeting, and the one thing that I should do is record. We can always pull it from YouTube when we forget. Thank you all for being here today. I'm going to start briefly by giving a general background of the A through F letter grades appeal process. We are here because schools can file an appeal of their overall A through F letter grade as outlined in the Arizona Revised Statute 15241, subsection J. The process does not consider changes to underlying data, only the letter grade that is assigned to the school. The last time this committee was held was March 2024 for letter grades for the 2022-2023 school year. The committee will vote on recommendations for the board to consider for the letter grade appeal applications received for the 2023-2024 school year. All accountability models and business rules were approved by the board on February 26, 2024. The policies and procedures governing the appeals process was approved on October 21st, 2024 board meeting. This year, the board received 44 appeal applications. 3 applications were withdrawn, and all 41 remaining applications needing committee recommendations are included on today's agenda. The appeal factors may range from adverse testing conditions, school or community emergency or events, school tragedy, incorrect data, or some combination of the grounds for the application. Information on appeal applications is public and was made available on Assembly on January 7th, 2025. Staff informed schools on the same day of the draft recommendations as well as procedures for observing this meeting by watching the live stream on YouTube or registering for the Zoom. Staff has been available to address questions from schools about the appeals process, the appeal recommendations, and this meeting. The window for appeal applications was open from the time letter grades were initially released on October 25th through November 15th. The schedule for today's action recommendations includes expedited appeals and non-expedited appeals. Expedited appeals are paper or document review only based upon the documentation submitted by the school. This year, the committee made the determination on which schools would be requested for a question and answer appearance, which is considered the non-expedited. In reviewing all appeal applications, board staff works with the school officials, the department staff, and takes the time to research any previous board actions that may impact the school's application, like any prior appeal conditions. Staff adds the information gathered to each appeal application and identifies it as such in the folders for the committee to review. Information, including application materials about schools submitting an appeal, is provided in that executive summary sheet, as well as those folders for all the supporting documents submitted by schools and gathered by board staff in the department. The committee will vote on those recommendations for the board to consider at the January 27th, 2025 board meeting. Do any committee members or staff have questions about today's meeting? Okay, hearing none. And I'm not surprised because you all have been on this committee for maybe 2 years now, I believe. So this is our 3rd year together. So first, we'll call the item of presentation, discussion, and possible action to consider the recommendations for expedited appeals. Items on this portion of the agenda will be taken as a consent agenda under each section, beginning with the adverse testing conditions section. The draft recommendations for these appeals are listed on the agenda item and on the executive summary sheet. If committee members have questions, concerns, or any issues with the draft recommendation, I would ask that you pull these items from the consent agenda for discussion when the items are called. The committee can discuss today's appeal items if they have any questions for staff from the board or from the Department of Education, or to hold discussion amongst themselves on the recommendations. Additionally, if any member has an appeal application for which they must recuse themselves from the vote for recommendation to the board, that would be indicated when we reach that item. So the first items to be called for review and recommendation are 2A1 through 2A8. This is adverse testing conditions. I'm going to read this list of schools: Emerson Elementary School, L. Thomas Heck Middle School, Liberty Elementary School, Nevitt Elementary School, Payson High School, Verrado Middle School, and Victory Collegiate Academy, and Webster Elementary. These items are related to reported adverse testing conditions, which could involve environmental factors such as power outages, weather events, or construction. It could also pertain to issues with the testing procedures in the school or concerns around the summative assessment results represented in the A through F outcomes. The draft recommendations are listed in this item. One item is lacking a recommendation due to the information necessary from the testing vendor still pending, and that would be 2A7, Victory Collegiate Academy. We also have a member, a school representative for one of these schools here that we would like to allow the opportunity to speak to the item, and that would be Verrado Middle School, correct? Litchfield? And L. Thomas Heck Middle School. Okay. Sorry for that. When schools come here in person, we like to provide the opportunity for them to speak and address the committee with anything, since they took the time out of their day to join us in person here.
Just for the committee, since you all are virtual, they selected not to speak at this time.
Okay, so at this time, then I would ask, would any committee members like to pull any of those other items, 2A1 through 6 or 2A8? Okay, hearing no schools being requested by a committee member for pulling from the consent agenda. Therefore, the committee would seek a motion to approve the draft recommendations for items 2A1 through 2A6 and 2A8 as presented. Does the committee have a motion in that regard?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
First from Dr. Hagerman, second from Member Meyerson. All in favor?
Aye.
And the motion carries. So regarding the item for presentation of additional information, which is 2A7, Victory Collegiate Academy, the testing vendor has not returned contact from the department regarding the school's reported testing connectivity issues. In these situations, the committee may consider tacitly approving or denying the appeal pending what information is received from the testing vendor that would provide evidence of these testing connections and delays with the students submitting the test results. I'd like to give Deputy Associate Superintendent Spangenberg the opportunity to discuss a little bit more about typically what they receive back from the vendor when they request information and what that might look like when we receive it.
Yes, thank you. So most testing incidents involving technology go directly to the vendor's customer service support so that they can get the students back in testing rather quickly. So we don't have those records in-house at the department. So I have requested any information on the school that indicates any kind of test irregularities or as we're looking at it here, interruptions to the testing experience. They will provide any details of the conversations that they had either on the phone, email, however it was communicated that there was an issue, the time that it took to resume testing, those types of impacts, if there was anything else involved that was unusual. So I will have those details when the vendor is able to provide that, but they have them in their records and they should be sharing them with me soon.
So at this time, in the past, we have typically issued the recommendation with that verbiage of pending information evidentiating the concerns with the testing conditions. And that could either be with an approval or with a denial. And so in this situation, this is Victory Collegiate Academy earning 70.98 points. They are 1.02 points from that next letter grade. And they are stating that they had issues where the students were having trouble submitting, and they're concerned that the results the students were submitting and logging on the test were not going into the system and logging their responses correctly. And that would be what we would seek to validate from the testing vendor.
Just, I have a quick question, Jessica. Or maybe for Bethany, when we get that information back, will it be relatively clear cut of like students' answers didn't get submitted or not, or is that sort of what they're claiming? And will we be able to firmly understand that from the test administrator?
Yes, the vendor will be able to provide details on any individual students, and if they were able to respond to, if they had responses for all of the items or if there were some missing.
Okay. And so Jessica, just to confirm, you're looking to either like deny until we get the information back from the department, or approve until we get back from the department. Is that right?
Typically in these situations, it would be recommending approval with that evidence then coming back from the vendor that would validate these concerns that are heard.
Great.
If the committee wishes that they these are valid issues with testing.
I'm fine to go with precedent on that one. Until
So
we hear.
Julie, if you make that motion, I'll make
Sure.
a second.
That sounds great. So move to approve the recommendation as provided, pending additional information from ADE assessment.
Awesome. Thank you.
And
we
I'll
have a
second.
first from Member Meyerson, second from Dr. Hagerman. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the motion carries. So that concludes that first issue of adverse testing conditions. We will then move on to B, which contains the other multiple categories appeals. These could have other factors or multiple categories such as incorrect data and adverse testing conditions, the school community events and incorrect data. One of these schools in this list, which consists of 2B1 Casa Grande Union High School, 2B2 High Desert Middle School, 2B3 Step Up School, is also lacking that information back from the testing vendor, and this would pertain to 2B3 Step Up School. Other than that, the draft recommendations are listed in the items 2B1 and 2B2. So I'll ask if the committee members would like to pull any of these items for discussion. Okay, hearing no schools being requested by a committee member, I would seek a motion, the committee would seek a motion to approve the draft recommendations for items 2B1 and 2B2 as presented. Does the committee have a motion in that regard?
So move.
And I'll second.
First from Dr. Clay and a second from Dr. Hagerman. All in favor?
Aye.
And the motion carries. Regarding the item for presentation of additional information, 2B3 Step Up School, this school has submitted 2 appeal factors. The first is related to school community events or emergency, and the second concerns adverse testing conditions. I believe we may have the school online as well, so I'm going to see if they've logged into the meeting at this time. Okay, I don't see them here yet. So the draft recommendation for the first appeal factor of school community events or emergency is to recommend denial due to lack of grounds for appeal, as staffing issues were unrelated to any school or community-wide tragic event. For the second appeal factor, more information is needed from the department. I would add that Step Up School primarily conducts their summative testing using paper and pencil forms. But for AZSci, they utilized the TestNav's digital testing platform and encountered internet connectivity problems. This was as confirmed in the supporting documents by teacher testimonials. So in such cases of these adverse testing conditions, the board seeks information from the department. And so right now I would just ask Bethany if there's additional information or the same conditions apply with the TestNav vendor.
Yeah, so again, we are still waiting to get that confirmation on the impacts of the testing for the AZSci from regarding this school from our vendor. And the same details would be able to be provided as far as the level of impact for the students involved and their ability to submit completed assessments.
Thank you so much, Deputy Associate Spangenberg. Regarding the data and information on this school, the school was issued an F letter grade in 2023-2024. They received 45.16 points earned with the A through F model of traditional K-8, and they are 1.84 points from that next letter grade. The AZSci bonus points in the traditional K-8 model are staggered, so you can either earn 0, 1.5, or 3 bonus points depending on your percent proficient compared to that statewide average on AZSci tested in grade 5 and in grade 8. So following this information, the committee can make a recommendation for the appeal factor 2 of recommending denial due to the unavailability of information necessary to assess the impact of the reporting adverse testing conditions, or recommending approval to the D overall letter grade pending the information from ADE assessment on AZSci.
Jessica, is this similar to the last one in that the president would be typically recommending approval based on, and then once we get the information, obviously we can go from there?
Yes.
Great.
It's a little bit different in that it's addressing the bonus point of AZSci and not proficiency and growth like the other appeal. But as I laid out, those are still those points on the table. Mm-hmm.
Great. Jackie, Scott, was that?
Yeah.
Is that what
No,
you had?
I guess, Jessica, the question I have, I guess it's, like you said, it's tricky because it's the bonus points.
Yeah.
And if they would get 1.5, that in between one, that wouldn't be enough to move it. They have to get the highest amount of bonus points. Have they historically gotten the full bonus points for science?
I'll pause for a moment for
Okay.
the Chief Accountability Officer, Sean Smith, to look up that information for the school.
I'm
And
just
it's
trying to,
for-
yeah, 'cause like if they have historically always gotten 3 points in that area, it seems like a legitimate thing. But if they've never gotten 3 points, it's that's my only dilemma with it is that.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Hagerman. So, yep, Step Up School. See someone logged in here with the name Kim Franco. Would you be able to identify yourself and if you're related to Step Up School? Or rejoining the meeting as a panelist. Kim Franco, would you be able to identify if you are related to Step Up School and representing them?
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can
Okay.
now.
Sorry, I am not. I am here for another school that's on the list, but I don't need to talk. I was just logging in to listen.
I appreciate it. Thank you. They
Thank you.
say, appreciate it. The schools let me know that they're logged in, but I can't find their name here on the list. So I'm going to send them a different level of invite to the meeting.
while Jessica's doing that, Sean, did you find the data for their science test scores?
You want to unmute?
Apologies. Shannon was able to find it, and they have not in the past ever received those points.
So to clarify for the committee, historically, Steptoe Schools has not received any points for science. Can you give some context as to why that might be?
It's based on if they meet or exceed the state average. So that would just indicate that they've never been above the state average in science.
So
Like-
committee members, any questions based on the information from Sean Smith?
Okay.
So I mean, I know the two options are to approve or deny. Is there ever a situation where we table until the actual information's out? Because it doesn't necessarily seem clear to me that we know how to sort that out.
Yeah, Dr. Hagerman, we can definitely lead with that and tabling a recommendation on the school for more information and more time. We would just schedule another virtual ATRF appeals committee, and that would not likely take action at the January 27th agenda. It might be the February board meeting agenda. But I think that that would be possible, and I would recommend delaying that as well.
And then I guess I'm totally fine with that. I guess one question is, it looks like if their letter grade issued was an F, it would seem unlikely that and even if it's a D, it would seem unlikely that if their proficiency was that far under the state average, that science would somehow be dramatically higher, I suppose. So I guess knowing that we could come back to it, it seems likely that it would be a denial, regardless, to your original point, Dr. Hagerman.
I guess Member Meyerson, I guess I kind of feel that that's where I see based on the trends of the past data, but I also don't want to just purely dismiss the
For
situation.
sure.
So like I'm trying to find that in between spot between.
Yeah, I guess I'm
So
wondering,
that's-
like, if it is a denial pending, like, so that way, like, if all
Oh,
things point to denial, but pending new information, then we're not coming back together, but we're only coming back together if the data supports.
oh. So
Does that
so-
feel right?
if we can make a motion like that it's a denial unless the
Unless the
information
data
comes
supports something different.
something different.
I like that too.
And so then if the information comes back as something different, reconvening
Would
the
come back
ATRF
together,
appeals
for
committee
sure.
to review
100%.
that updated information.
So if the information comes back and it's more complex and more nuanced and leads to more questions, then
Yeah,
just-
absolutely don't want to discount the school getting what they need. And I think that the data supports it potentially leading in this direction. But yes, to your point, Dr. Hagerman, pending. That sounds good to me.
I think so too, and I think it sounds fair, and it still gives that hope thing in there. You know, we don't want to say there's no way you're doomed, right?
No, 100%.
Let's go ahead and see what happens. You know, but if nothing happens, this is what the answer is going to be. I can live with that.
Okay. So
So then the
then,
motion would be, I move to deny this appeal, however, pending new information coming back from ADE assessment, reconvening as needed.
is there a second?
I second.
Okay, first from Member Meyerson, second from Dr. Clay. All in favor? And the motion carries. Okay, thank you, Shannon. Appreciate that. Okay, now items 2C1 through 2C2 are called for a review recommendation. These items are related to school community events or emergency. They include events that might have impacted performance results, such as temporary school closures, threats of violence, and other school or community-wide issues. The schools listed here are Academy of Tucson Middle School and Dreaming Summit Elementary School. The draft recommendations are listed in the items, and I will pause and allow the committee members to consider if there are any schools they would like to pull for an item for recusal or discussion. Okay. And hearing no schools being requested by a committee member for pulling from the consent agenda, therefore, the committee would seek a motion to approve the draft recommendations for item 2C1 and 2C2 as presented. Does the committee have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Any second?
Second.
Okay, first from Dr. Hagerman, second from Dr. Clay. All in favor?
Aye.
And the motion carries. So the following items to be called for review and recommendation are 2D1 and 2D2. These items are related to school tragedy, typically a singular event or a repeated series of events which endangered or otherwise negatively impact the schooling experience. The draft recommendations are listed in these items, and the schools listed here are Riverside Traditional School and the Star School. Does the committee have any items that they would like to pull from this consent agenda? Okay, hearing none. The committee would seek a motion to approve the draft recommendations for items 2D1 and 2D2 as presented.
I'll make that motion.
Any second?
Second.
First from Dr. Hagerman, second from Member Meyerson. All in favor? And the motion carries. So next, 2E1 through 2E5 are called for review and recommendation. These items are related to reported incorrect data. Incorrect data appeals address gaps or differences in the calculations from the school's demographics or the performance results on A through F.
And I
the school-
will recuse myself from this one, Jessica.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Member Meyerson. So, the schools listed here are AmeriSchools Academy, Yuma South, Chrisman High School, Desert Star Academy, Desert Sunrise High School, and San Marcos Elementary School.
Oops, just kidding. Not this one.
We changed
Not
the
yet.
Not yet. Not yet. Sorry. I thought I was like really following along. So sorry. All in on this one.
And so the draft recommendations are listed in the items, and I will ask if any committee members would like to pull an item from this consent agenda for discussion. Okay, hearing no schools being requested by a committee member for polling for discussion. Therefore, the committee would seek a motion to approve the draft recommendations for items 2E1 through 2E5 as presented. Does the committee have a motion?
So moved.
And I'll second.
Okay, first from Member Meyerson, second from Dr. Hagerman. All in favor?
Aye.
And the motion carries. Okay, there we go. This is the item, Member Meyerson.
Thank you.
Uh,
I will
the
recuse
next-
myself.
The next items to be called for review and recommendation are 2F1 through 2F6. These items are related to reported incorrect data and acceleration readiness eligibility. These schools aren't eligible for the full 10 points in the K-8 model for this indicator. The school's points earned in acceleration readiness were removed from their numerator, with the 10 points for the indicator removed from their denominator, resulting in the performance outcomes associated with the draft recommendations. So therefore, these schools are just not able to access those full 10 points, typically due to being new schools that are growing their grade level membership or not having all the prior year comparison information in the acceleration readiness outcomes. So I would like to give the department an opportunity to add any more information they'd like to about this particular issue and how we identified it and what's going on. Mm-hmm.
Good morning, members of the board. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak. This is something that we've been looking at over the last few months with the technical advisory committees. And as you're probably aware, the system is designed to balance itself out as a compensatory system. When any one piece of that is not fully available, it can kind of adjust how things go. And this is something we've seen in acceleration readiness in particular, even just over the last few years, where when schools aren't eligible for even the full 10 points, even if they did everything perfectly, that can kind of put them at a disadvantage when it comes to this. So it's definitely something worth considering. Is something we've kind of looked at over the last few months to try and determine, is there a solution going forward? It's been a little tricky to figure out something in place or to put in place that will work, but it certainly affects schools who can't meet that eligibility criteria for even the 10 points of the, most schools have 20 on the table and they just need to get 10. These schools don't even have 10 on the table.
Any questions or schools that the committee would like to pull from the agenda item? Okay. So hearing none, the committee would seek a motion to approve the draft recommendations for items 2F1 through 2F6 as presented.
So move. Oh, Jackie, you go. I'll do the second. Jackie can be the first, if that's okay.
Okay, Dr. Clay is the first and Dr. Hagerman second. All in favor?
Aye.
And the motion carries.
Force of habit, huh?
So the following items to be called for review and recommendation are 2G1 through 2G4. These items are related to incorrect data and self-reported components such as CCRI. Data is self-reported by schools by the end of July. The expectation is for schools to reach out to the department's accountability and research staff prior to the letter grade release in October to correct any of the self-reported outcomes. And the department adds this data from the self-reported very regularly into the accountability portal. And so schools can see that logged in pretty quickly as they've entered that data. And so they'd be able to identify if there's anything wrong or missing information in there. And that's when they would reach out to the department staff to rectify the issue. So these schools listed on here have communicated with the department prior to the letter grade release to resolve any of the problems that they identified. And it just wasn't possible to get it through by the letter grade release. And so the draft recommendations are listed in the items for Navajo County Instruction for Success, Ray Junior Senior High School, Swarita Digital Pathways Academy, and San Carlos High School. And oftentimes these also have conditions to register for the department's district LEA accountability coordinator list, as well as then not appealing on that grounds in the future. Are there any questions or schools that the committee would like to pull from this item? Okay, hearing none. The committee would seek a motion to approve the draft recommendations for items 2G1 through 2G4 as presented. Does the committee have a motion in that regard?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
First from Member Meyerson, first from Dr. Hagerman, second from Member Meyerson. All in favor? And the motion carries. The next items to be called are 2H1 through 2H5, which are related to incorrect data for special education inclusion, which is an indicator that is measured for 2 points in the acceleration readiness indicator for K-8 schools. The intent of special education inclusion is to reward schools that have greater than that statewide average of special education students in their general education classroom at least 80% of the school day. The state board adopted this metric based on research demonstrating positive outcomes for students in schools that increase the time that special education students serve in general education classrooms. The calculation is the K-8 students receiving special education services in a general education classroom at least 80% of the day on October 1st, 2023 for the letter grade release, with the K-8 full academic year students in the denominator. October 1 marks the census date where schools report to the Department of Education the counts of which students are provided special education services. This data is important for federal reporting, which includes reports such as the Least Restrictive Environment Report. It is also manages the eligibility and funding for various grants and funding for the special education student. So while IEPs might indicate the necessity for alterations in the student's learning environment throughout the school year, it's crucial for these accountability measures to establish uniform data timelines that then apply to all the schools. So the draft recommendations are listed in the item for these schools. Desert Wind Middle School, Ignacio Conches School, Maxine O. Bush Elementary School, Phoenix Day School for the Deaf, and Saddle Elementary School. Would the committee like to pull any of these schools from the consent agenda for discussion? And then I'd like to give the department an opportunity to add any more information based on the calculation of special education inclusion and what they've encountered over the years from schools with this data and how their systems are factoring in and gathering this data.
So this one probably the main consideration to look at if the numbers are very close. Obviously, we can get into a concern when we're using fractions and decimals here, right? Since we're talking about actual students sitting in classrooms, when that, the statewide average is 10.67% included. Sometimes, depending on the school's configuration, 10.67 might multiply out into a fraction of a student being enrolled or not. So if those numbers are really close, it's worth considering, is there a number that could even arrive them at 10.67 one way or the other, So that's a consideration. But I think in general, we've looked at these and kind of tried to explore every avenue on them, right? You got it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that October 1 date has been, we've spoken with the Exceptional Student Services and with the Department of Accountability staff that has been a date where that information is pretty firm and validated by the schools and by the department, and really is what funds the student at the end of the day as well for different services. So if they're changing throughout the year, they could be even changing from being general education and then into a more restrictive environment. And so having one single capture date at least keeps it uniform for all schools, and that is the date that they're expected to have all of their information available and provided then to the department. Okay, based on that information, do any committee members like to pull any items from the consent agenda for this item? Okay, so hearing none, the committee would seek a motion to approve the draft recommendations for items 2H1 through 2H5 as presented. Does the committee have a motion in that regard?
I will make that a motion.
Second.
First from Dr. Hagerman, second from Member Meyerson. All in favor? And the motion carries. Items 2I1 through 2I4 are called for review and recommendation. These items are related to reported incorrect data and withdrawal codes. Withdrawal code changes typically involve the ARS 15915 prior year data corrections process. These codes are reviewed by the department and their correction is reflected in the recalculation of indicator points. Item 2I3, Snowflake High School withdrew their appeal application, so recommendation will not be requested. The schools where a recommendation will be requested are Bradshaw Mountain High School, East Valley Academy, and Yuma High School. The draft recommendations are provided in the executive summary sheet. Do any committee members want to pull an item from this consent agenda for those three schools? Okay, hearing none, the committee would seek a motion to approve the draft recommendations for items 2I1, 2I2, and 2I4 as presented. Does the committee have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
First from Dr. Clay, second from Dr. Hagerman. All in favor?
Aye.
And the motion carries. So that concludes the recommendations for the committee for item 2 with those expedited appeals, with where we have 2 that are pending some additional information from the assessment department. And as that information comes in, we will provide it then to the committee members and get that added in, and then we can decide if we need to reconvene or have any other meetings. And for now, the schools will be notified that that will go to the board agenda, but we'll be in constant contact with them. So then we'll move on to presentation, discussion, and possible action on recommendations to consider the non-expedited appeals for schools Dr. Howard K. Conley Elementary School, Galveston Elementary School, Hartford Sylvia Encinas Elementary School. So items on this portion of the agenda will be discussed as a whole as they are represented by a singular school representative. The representative will introduce themselves, their reasons for the school's appeals, and stand for questions from the committee. The draft recommendations for these appeals are listed on the agenda item and on the executive summary sheet. The first appeal application, 3A1, is to be reviewed by the committee, Dr. Howard K. Conley Elementary School. This school is issued a B letter grade for school year 23-24 with 83.37 points earned. This leaves 0.63 points to the A letter grade, and the issues are reported with the A-F model. The next appeal application, 3A2, is for Galveston Elementary School. This school is issued a C letter grade for school year 23-24 with 69.25 points earned, with 1.75 points to the B letter grade. Issues are reported in the EL growth, grade 3 minimally proficient, and chronic absenteeism. The last appeal application to be reviewed by the committee is Hartford Sylvia Encinas Elementary School. This school was issued a C letter grade for school year 23-24 with 71.98 points earned, leaving 0.02 points to the B letter grade. Issues are reported with the A-F model and EL growth. So at this time, I'd like to invite Dr. Jennifer Fletcher from Chandler Unified School District to introduce yourselves and discuss these appeals. Stand for questions from the committee.
All right, good morning, board members. I appreciate you taking the time, as I'm fully aware these are not your typical appeals you may hear. I'm Dr. Fletcher with Chandler Unified School District. You may know my name. I'm an ATAC member and was Sean Smith's job many moons ago as the Chief Accountability Officer when we were redesigning letter grades back in 2016-17. So I'm very familiar with the letter grade models and systems. And in full honesty, I am appealing 3 of our schools, but really I'm appealing for some greater changes for the greater good for the state in terms of our letter grades. With Conley, they are 0.63 points away from a B. They were an A last year. And I'm sure you've read my very thorough apologies for my long narratives appeals. But really what a lot of the appeals today come down to is, can we as a state know to 100th of a degree whether a school is an A or a B or a C or a D or an F, right? And so that's kind of the crux of the issue. We also, the board members, I perpetually here, I hope you feel similarly, want there to be access for every school to have an A letter grade. But if you are perfect in growth, perfect in EL, perfect in acceleration readiness, you've earned all of those points, you could still fluctuate between an A, a B, or a C, depending on your proficiency level. So the 3 schools in particular that we're appealing today are all Title I schools. And again, I'm not saying that means we should grade inflate. I'm not saying that means we should do things for certain zip codes, but we all know the reality that is faced in education. So I'm just asking that the board, in particular with Conley, I recognize 0.63 is a little bit further away than a 0.02, like Hartford. Just consider that for all of the consistencies that are occurring across our schools, the work that they put in, that we evaluate our systems in place and see how we can make improvements and gains. Jessica, apologies. Do you want me to go each school or stop for questions on each one?
Right at this time, I was actually going to defer then to Sean Smith to point out those mathematical issues with the formula that he'll be introducing also in the January board meeting.
Thanks again. Members of the committee, the points that we're looking at here are valid points. You know, as I mentioned before, sometimes when we're getting into those small fractions, depending on, you know, if you've got 10 students or 15 or 20, the way those numbers multiply out may not even give you the opportunity, you know, like the difference maker might be a fraction of a student. And in reality, you know, we kind of brought this before the committee a couple years ago when we talked about the precision that we have. You know, in a math textbook, it's going to tell you you can only have as many significant figures as your least precise unit of measurement. So in a lot of these, our least precise unit of measurement is whole children. And so getting into those decimal places, sometimes what we're hearing, what that number says is not the precision down to the 100th decimal place so much as it's saying, we know this is some number over a given threshold. And, you know, when we've had, I think most of us could kind of, from a classroom standpoint, agree, you know, like if you had to grade essays or math papers down to the 100th of a percent, that would be pretty challenging to distinguish the performance of one student to another. So any of these that are really close, again, I think the challenge on the other side is that we don't have yet like an across the board mechanism to say like, all right, anytime it's this kind of difference, we can say for sure that it's within the thing. I say a lot in conversations with policymakers, with school leaders, that I think some of the value of this system is when we're looking at the big code and business rules and the algorithm that produces the results, you know, that's a time-saving mechanism. That's designed to produce it quickly and without being a burden on the schools. And when both schools and board members and Department of Education kind of get to the same place, we say, you know what, based on the rules, like we all kind of get to the same place. The algorithm worked, it saved us the time. When we're close and there's some disagreements, it's worth having those discussions where human beings step in and don't just blindly follow what the algorithm is saying just because it produced a difference of, you know, in this case, 0.02 points. I think the wiser course in a lot of times is to have a discussion and see, is there a meaningful difference that could be distinguished? Is there merit, and, you know, what impacts that has to the broader system?
Thank you for sharing, Sean. Dr. Fletcher, did you want to go ahead and then introduce the Dr. Howard K. Connolly School first?
Yep. So specific to Conley, as I mentioned, they're 0.63 points away. Again, full transparency, I put this out there partly to let you know of the changes I'm hoping to make in ATAC and some of the shifts I'd like to see in our letter grade systems. Fully recognizing that this is a long shot, I'm aware, but the impact, I think, is something I really want to speak to on our, not probably necessarily our parents. You know, parents watch our letter grade systems. You all are familiar with that, right? It's on Zillow, a school's letter grade, but the impact it really has on the teachers and the students, knowing that they did the same things, they consistently saw the same rough data points, and some of our metrics compare to state averages, some compare the site to itself, right? And so it's hard to know. It's a moving target. It's hard to know what your goal is year over year, to be that A, to be that B, to be that C. And when you drop a letter grade, that has an impact on your staff. It takes morale down. I go out to the sites and I'm a cheerleader for them. I'm a cheerleader for what they do, as many of our districts and school, right, administrators and staff are. But when you're that close, you know, it's hard to swallow. So really with Conley, it's just the ask to raise them from the B to the A that they earned last year. There's no true data issues other than, can we truly accurately know to that degree which schools are B's versus A's? Again, full transparency. I'm not trying to pull one over.
Does the committee have any questions right now at this time for Dr. Howard K. Connolly School? Okay, and hearing none, Dr. Fletcher, would you like to introduce Galveston Elementary School and the data concerns there?
Yep, so Galveston has a couple different data issues. They are 2.75 points away. 2 of those points could be earned back in incorrect data with their chronic absence data showing as a 0% in FY23. So could be an easy win, but that still leaves them 0.75 away from the higher letter grade. So again, I threw everything into the peel that seemed meaningful, right? So Galveston has an incredibly high population of English learners. You probably read, we call those in Chandler our triple whammies because they are included in 90% of your letter grade model. I'm not saying we shouldn't be held accountable to them. Please make note of that. But when you get English learners, all levels coming in pre-emergent, emergent in every grade, and we know the higher grades up they are, the harder and longer it takes them to learn English. That's multiple years on multiple years of low performance on statewide assessments. And so for their EL growth, they made gains compared to themselves last year. Unfortunately, the state made greater gains. So last year they earned 5 points in EL growth, and this year they only earned 3. But again, being away by a 0.05 from that 4th point. And if they had that 4th point, that would have gotten them to a B. They did drop 2 letter grades from an A to a C last year. So again, just something tough that the teachers had a hard time swallowing because they feel they're doing their best. And if they were a smaller population of EL students, mathematically, their odds of having greater than the state average, if you look at the numbers, I reduce it by a 10%, they would have had greater than the state average. So again, we're talking a lot about equations and math, and I understand and agree, as Sean said, some of this is time saving, but the root question is that's what's best, and are we doing the calculations in the best way? And then I believe I had grade 3 ELA minimally proficient on there. Again, they changed from a 60% to a 60.94%. That's a difference of 1 student. It's hard to make a gain in grade 3 ELA when the state as a whole is seeing a 3% drop in increase in minimally proficient students. So again, just questioning some of our calculations, how and why we do things the way that we do them, and hoping to get them at least from the C to a B, because again, 2 of those points are chronic absence, and then they would be 0.75 away, which is 0.05 away from a higher point in growth. That's a lot of numbers and data at you, sorry.
Anything you'd like to add to that, Sean Smith?
I'm just digging through the numbers right now. I know in the past we've seen where there was an error in the student information system that reported a 0 for chronic absenteeism that kind of gave a false reading. And then I just want to look at the EL stuff again real quick and kind of see how that slices out, if I can take a second for that. All right.
I can just fill the void. It is the 0% in FY23. So we also had a school, San Marcos, that you just approved on the incorrect data consent, which was the same issue with the 0% showing from our student information system in chronic absence in FY23. It showed on prelim. So we didn't pay enough attention to it by final because the letter grade didn't change, and then it was gone by final, at which point we couldn't have changed it anyway.
So committee members, this is Executive Director Ross. Just to maybe table set a bit for what's possibly in front of you. Obviously, there can be a vote on each school the way you've voted all the way through, which is to accept the recommendation provided or to not accept the recommendation provided. You can also, in addition to that, you can also use this meeting to sort of charge the technical advisory committees with examining issues as they move forward, looking at the business rules for 24-25 and forward. So there's sort of two pieces here. There's the votes for the schools as presented in the recommendations, and then there's also the ability to, and that's kind of they're two separate things. There's also the ability to sort of give some guidance to what you would like to see from the tax moving forward.
And then just to put some student numbers on it, when we're talking about the EL growth, the difference that we're observing depending on how the students performed, what we're seeing between points earned and the difference between a higher threshold of points could be the difference between the performance of 3 students and up to 10 students, depending on just how it came out and what they scored. So it is getting down to small. I think the total number of students here was 109. So we're looking at, anywhere from 10 to a smaller fraction of their student body for ELs that have the difference maker here.
So at this time, do committee members have questions that they would like to ask the school for Galveston Elementary School? Okay, hearing none. Dr. Fletcher, if you'll please present on Hartford, Sylvia, and Senius.
All right, last one, I promise. All right, so Hartford, I had more I could have done just for the record, but I spared all of us. Hartford is 0.02 away from earning a B this year. Again, I'm going to sound like a broken record. As a Title I school, I pulled some numbers. They consistently earn 14 to 15 points in proficiency, 43 to 45 points in growth, 7 to 8 points in EL, and 6 to 8 points in acceleration readiness. In the prior 2 school years, they did earn that B. So they're riding pretty consistent. That 0.02 is rough. That's right there, right? It's really close. And to make matters worse, they were 0.02 away from meeting their EL growth. So if they had had that 0.02 on EL growth, we wouldn't have been the 0.02 away on the letter grade. I told them if they wanted to play the lottery, 2 was their number this year. But the EL, just that 0.02 on growth, 0.02 on the composites. Again, same thing with grade 3 ELA minimally proficient. They were right there. It was a difference of 2 students. And again, I don't want to reiterate all of it. It's kind of the same messaging, but it's really that, especially for our title schools, are they all capable and able to earn that A letter grade that I'd like ATAC in particular and the board to really evaluate how we're making sure it's fair for all, right?
Thank you so much, Dr. Fletcher. Are there any questions as that one relates to earlier information we shared about EL growth and the fractions of students? Okay, and hearing none right now, I would call the item and the draft recommendations presented for 3A through 3C. Would the committee like to make a recommendation to approve the draft recommendations as presented?
Can I make a statement before I do?
Yes.
So I have been attending the ATAC basically for the same reasons that Dr. Fletcher is talking about right now. However, I don't see the appeal process as kind of the right avenue to make any kind of changes to the system. Though I do kind of like what Sean kind of put out is the idea that we want the ATAC to look at the system to ensure there's not kind of arbitrary or capricious elements in the system, but that work is at the business rules and at the ATAC level, not at the appeals level. For that reason, I would motion that we approve the recommendations.
Second.
I'd like to second, but I would also like to make a statement. I agree with Dr. Hageman. I don't think these changes should be at this level right here. But what is done for me is now I'm definitely going to be focusing on this because We have the letter of the law and we have the spirit of the law, right? Dr. Fletcher is talking about the spirit of the law too. Hey, this is what's really going on, but the data says this. And if we vote the other way, then we have to consider all the other schools that fell under the same situation. I'm sure there are a lot of them, so I'm really concerned about that. There are a lot of them now. So what we have to do at the ATAC and other levels is we need to fix the letter of the law so that the spirit of the law will be implemented and everything is done where it's fair and it's equitable and it's true. Because I do have concerns, not just for your schools, Dr. Fletcher, but for any school that it's this much and it was based on a number, or based on a student. So we have to fix that because I know how devastating it is to a community to fall a letter grade, or if the grade was supposed to be and should have been. The community will understand that, but new people coming into the community and businesses and all these other, they don't understand that. So we have to really put a lot of our passions and our time into refining this process.
Thank you, Dr. Clay. So first from Dr. Hagerman, second from Dr. Clay. Member Myerson, what is your vote?
Yeah, no, agreed. I think, and I would also just echo, I just so appreciate you taking the time to come and share this with us today. I think that I could not agree more with both the comments that Dr. Hagerman and Dr. Clay just shared. And I think as a school leader also, like the painful, like 0.0 whatever away from anything is just rough. And so I hear that deeply and absolutely recognize that the intent of this should be to show what each school is doing and what they're possible, what is possible for our kids. And so oftentimes a numerical system it's impossible for that to always be completely aligned to that. And so I think as much as possible for us to continue to improve there and to figure out how the system matches what we know is happening in schools, I think there's always, I'm sure, opportunity. So again, I echo the recommendation but appreciate so deeply your comments, Dr. Fletcher.
And the motion carries. Thank you, committee members. Thank you, Dr. Fletcher.
Jessica, sorry,
And
because there was some talk in between, can you have them vote again, please?
yeah, not a problem at all. The committee would seek a motion to approve the draft recommendations for items 3A through 3C. Does the committee have such a motion?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
and first from Dr. Hagerman, second from Dr. Clay. All in favor?
Aye.
And the motion carries. That concludes all the schools that have appealed for the 2023-2024 letter grade applications. The board will consider these recommendations on January 27th, 2025 at the board meeting. There is an opportunity for a call to the public, either written, verbal, or a combination if desired by the schools. So they will be notified as to how to register for that call to the public and when this recommendations are published on the agenda at the end of this week. And if there are no other summaries for action.
This is Executive Director Ross. Before we formally adjourn, committee members, I just want to thank you again for serving on this committee. I know this is a big commitment of your time. And I also want to say a huge thank you to Jessica and to Sean Smith, who spearhead this work. It is a tremendous amount of work. It is always done with an eye to helping schools and to helping schools understand and navigate the process. I think we have a nice metric for success on the work we've been doing on A through F, in that for the last 2 years in a row, we have a record low number of appeals, which tells me that the first release of letter grades is going very smoothly. And that is in every part due to the work of our technical advisory committees, the board, and especially Jessica and Sean. So just wanted to make sure they got a big shout out.
Yeah, and Sean, actually, just as somebody who also went through a process with them this year, it could not have been easier, and just the communication from Jessica and the work of Sean and the department. Again, I couldn't be more grateful, and both getting to see it from this view and as a participant. So I would just very deeply echo that. Thank you to both of you.
Thank you so much, committee members. I will see you then at the board meeting. Have a great day. This meeting is
Thank
adjourned
you.
at 10:06 a.m.
Bye, guys.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.